Alright, so I'm pretty sure everybody saw this battle coming ever since I bought this reel right here. And it's going to be yet another chapter in probably what is the fiercest rivalry in bait casting. And that is Daiwa's Tatula against Shimano's Curado. And in this particular round, we are pitting probably the two most expensive versions of these reels up against each other. That of course is the Daiwa Tatula Elite Longcast, which came out this year, versus Shimano's Mighty Curado DC, which came out last year. Now previously I've pitted the original Tatula Type R up against the Shimano Curado I. I pitted the fanboy favorite Tatula SV up against the Curado 70. And incidentally, I looked on Tackle Warehouse and the Curado 70 is going on clearance. Didn't know if you guys knew that. So if it's going on clearance, you know a replacement is coming soon. Just want to throw that out there. And I've also pitted Daiwa's Tatula CT Type R up against Shimano's Curado K. And during all those battles and all those tests, the Curado has won 12 times and the Tatula has won 3 times, but technically it's actually 5 times if you count the fact that the Tatula CT Type R beat the Curado K on 3 separate occasions, throwing the weightless Senko. Now I'm going to be putting these two reels through the standardized testing this winter, but before we do that, I'm going to put them through the 1/2 ounce casting plug contest, just to see what these reels can do when they stretch their legs. Now I've analyzed these two reels, and a lot of you guys are probably thinking, you know, the Curado DC is just gonna stomp all over this Tatula Elite. But during my analysis, I found that the Tatula Elite is gonna have 4 advantages over the Curado DC, while the Curado DC only really has 1 advantage over the Tatula Elite. And to illustrate those advantages, we're gonna have to pop the scale out. So we got the scale out, and before we start weighing things, let's talk about the 1 advantage that the Curado DC has over the Tatula, and that of course it's gonna be its DC brake system. And the way the DC brake system works and why it's an advantage is that the DC brakes only apply braking as needed depending on the spool rotation and if the system senses, I guess, an overrun. So while most brake systems apply braking throughout the entire cast, DC brakes only apply it when necessary. Alright, so that's the only advantage, in my opinion, for the Curado DC. Now it is a big advantage, but the Tatula has 4 advantages in my opinion, and the first one is going to be basically an on-paper advantage. I don't really think it's an advantage, but that is the T-Wing line guide system. Now I've done a video on this T-Wing system versus a non-T-Wing, and in my opinion there's really no advantage there, but on paper it is an advantage. Alright, so let's talk about the second advantage, and it's a pretty big one in my opinion, and that is going to be the weight. Alright, so Curado DC, Tatula Elite. Now they're both pretty similar in size. Now in my opinion the body of the Curado is a little bit smaller than the Tatula, but the Curado has this huge massive gearbox hanging off the side of it, while the Tatula has a shockingly small gearbox relatively compared to other reels these days hanging off the side of it. So that means this Curado DC is much heavier at 7.8 ounces, while the Tatula comes in at a much lighter 6.7 ounces. So it's lighter by over an ounce, and that's pretty cool despite having an aluminum handle side plate, while the Curado's is graphite. And the reason why that's a big advantage is because lighter reels make for lighter combos, and I can swing lighter combos harder and faster. So that's a big advantage for the Tatula Elite Long Cast. Now the second advantage is the most important advantage in my opinion, and that is going to be the spools. So that means I gotta pop the spools out. Okay, so the spools are out, and let's take a look at them. Now they both have the long spool shaft design, which you can see the Curado's spool shaft is much longer. And they're both 34 millimeters in diameter, but the Curado DC spool is noticeably wider and it's a little bit shallower, but because it's wider, I believe the line capacity on these two are going to be pretty much the same. But since the Curado DC has to have its electromagnetic assembly for the brakes attached to the spool, it is much heavier. You're looking at a 20.7 gram spool, so that is super heavy by today's standards. While the Elite Long Cast sports a high grade A7075 aluminum to lighten it up, and it weighs in at 14.13 grams. So you're looking at an over 6 gram advantage for the Tatula Elite. And of course also Daiwa has stated that they've tuned the Mag 4C braking for long casting. But you're wondering, you know, why is that a big deal? And this is why. Now, do you guys remember this reel right here? This is the Scorpion MGL. And in case you don't remember, I put the Scorpion MGL up against the Curado DC in this very same cast battle with the 1/2 ounce plug, as well as the lighter spooled Curado K in the 1/4 ounce plug cast battle, and it beat them both. And that's significant because the spool on the Scorpion MGL is virtually the same as the Tatula Elite Long Cast. So 14.13 for the Scorpion MGL, 14.14 for the Tatula Elite. So that's 3 reasons why the Tatula Elite has a really good chance of beating out this Curado DC. But let's talk about the last reason. So the final reason why the Tatula Elite could beat this Curado DC is the actual thing that we're casting in this battle, and that is the casting plug. Now, there are reels that have beaten Curado DC reels in casting plug battles because of the massive spool weight advantage they held over them. Scorpion MGL being one, and the METANIUM MGL being another, as it beat out easily the METANIUM DC in the casting plug battles. So yeah, there we go. When it comes to DC reels, they can be beaten when throwing very aerodynamic, dense objects. So let's string them up and get out on the field and see what's what. Okay, so I'm back from the field, and before we get into the results, I just want to let everyone know who's been emailing me and messaging me about this reel that it has arrived. Now, I've been in California for the last week or so, but I got home a couple of days ago, and I will be doing the unboxing and analysis of this reel very soon. But there are a couple of videos I wanted to release ahead of this. Alright, so let's talk about the brake settings for each of these reels. Now, with the Tatula Elite Long Cast, I was actually able to go down to number 4 on the mag dial, but there was so much overrun in the middle of the cast on that setting that it did rob it of some distance. So by going to 5, I was able to find the right mix of, just a little bit of overrun during the middle of the cast, but it didn't rob it of distance like setting number 6 was doing. So all the casts for the Tatula Elite were on setting 5, which provided the longest casts in practice. And of course, the zero adjuster remains just like it is from the factory. Alright, so with the Curado, it was kind of weird, but at the same time it wasn't. Now, I was not able to access the extreme long distance cast mode on the DC brakes, which is of course number 1. And that's because the conditions were pretty much damn near perfect, hardly any wind at all. So if I wanted to use the number 1 setting on the DC brakes, I had to tighten the spool tension up too much, and that robbed the Curado DC of distance. So I found that by going to 2, which is the braid mono mode, I was able to loosen the spool tension up to just minimize the side-to-side play, and I was actually able to get the longest distances in practice on the braid mono mode. Alright, so with that being said, I'm going to flash these numbers up for you guys. And as you can see, once again, the Curado beats the Tatula. The Curado DC averaging 197.5 feet, while the Elite Long Cast averaged 191.55 feet. And to be honest, I thought the Curado DC would win, but I thought it would win by a way bigger margin than that. And it didn't. So I think that's because I wasn't able to access that number 1 brake setting. And also for the fact that I broke off one of the casting plugs in practice for the Curado DC. And whenever I do that, I break off a plug or a lure in these cast battles, I always, no matter how hard I try, it makes me hold back on giving it, 100% full swing. So that may have affected the Curado DC, but no excuses. It is what it is. Okay, so with the Tatula though, I was able to achieve 195 and 197 foot cast in practice. Now, unfortunately, you couldn't really duplicate those casts on video, so that just kind of reinforces the DC brakes for me, that you can long cast and it's consistent cast after cast after cast. Alright, so one more thing about the Tatula is that when retrieving that plug in through the grass, I did notice that the retrieve on the Tatula was noticeably more precise and rigid versus the Curado DC. Almost as smooth too. And I think it's getting smoother the more I use this reel. So that's a positive. Still would have liked some micro gears though. Alright, so a very close battle between the two. I thought the Curado DC would stomp out this Elite Long Cast by probably 20 foot, and I was wrong. So that leads me to believe that this is going to be a really close series going through the standardized testing. Because if you remember, the Curado K got beaten by the Tatula Type R with the lighter lures. So we're just going to have to wait to find out once I do those tests. All right, guys, thanks a lot.